Yes, let's talk about it indeed. Welcome back to another episode of Elaborate. I'm your host, Jake Lloyd Bacon. Thank you so much for tuning in, for sticking with us. We're learning, we're growing, we're doing it together. I am so thrilled to chat with an incredibly old friend of mine who I have not spoken to in a very long time. Today, I get the pleasure of reconnecting with comedian and writer and podcaster Kortney Shane Williams. Hi, Kortney.
What up, man?
Kortney Shane Williams. This is, man, I don't even know how long it's been.
I know exactly how long it's been.
Do you?
No. I mean, I can calculate the day. I'm 36 years old. The last time I would have seen you would be when I was 22. And so that's been 14 years.
Oh my gosh. 14 years? No. Because you, all right, man, this is, it's kind of a mind fuck, to be totally honest with you.
You're old, man.
Before we even
a grizzly vet. I'm like Danny Glover. This is Lethal Weapon 3.
Oh shit! Why aren't you and I starring in some fucking sweet buddy cop thing right now? We're fucking apropos of that. But anyway, all right. Well, listen, there's plenty of shit we got to catch up on. But Kortney,
you look good, man.
You look not as good as you, man. I saw your post this morning talking about bending them knees, getting out there.
Oh man, because I'm trying to beat COVID firsthand, man. I'm asthmatic, so like when COVID first came out, it's the whole thing. It's like, yo, you need to get your lungs stronger. Man, that's when I really started getting after.
According to my significant other, Alexandra, she thinks I have like an undiagnosed asthma because I can't fucking breathe ever.
Wow.
And I'm like, so I'm right there with you. But I've also just, I put on a lot of quarantine weight. I was already getting big.
Oh, really?
So I was already getting big, but the quarantine really, you spend all day at home looking at yourself when quarantined. So
true. Yeah, man. Yeah, we got to get into that.
But
I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I know you probably got time constraints with podcasts, so I don't want,
not at all. Also,
Bill Simmons doing like a 3-hour.
You can cut me off by telling me I look good any fucking time you want. All right,
great,
telling me I look all right. Kortney, you and I knew each other when we were both sort of. I don't know how many years even in you were at the time that we met doing stand up. A few years, brand new. Yeah, pretty much brand new comics in Tampa, Florida, of all places.
Yeah, man.
And I was 25-ish, somewhere in that range. And shit, man, I feel like you and I became pretty fast friends because we were sort of the only two people in the Tampa comedy scene that weren't like. And I'm using this term weirdly, but like mainstream comedy type of people that weren't like party comics. Like there was a lot of party comics.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, man. Your perspective is definitely going to be different than mine because like, my personality was just so much more, introverted and insular that I didn't really see a ton, really around me. Like I didn't even know. Like when I moved and people were like, oh, the comedy scene. I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
There's no scene.
You know what I mean?
So it's tough to be like, me and you weren't in thing. I feel like I definitely like gravitated towards you, especially towards the beginning. It's kind of weird because you worked at the Improv.
Yeah.
And I did some sets. So I remember this. It's some details in my comedy career that really like formulated like kind of how I wanted to do it and like who I was. And like you were instrumental in the beginning of that, even though you probably didn't know. So I remember you used to, because you did the sound at the Improv. So you used to like tip me off on like weird comedy stuff. And my comedy background was just, like Comic View was huge and stuff like that. So like when I got in, I realized like, had to get my own style. I realized that pretty quick. And you used to like burn these random CDs of comedians, Joe. Like, I remember like listening to Pablo Francisco. I had never heard anything. I grew up in like, my mom's a minister and like no stand up in the house. Like, so I remember like Pablo Francisco. And the first time I heard Mike Birbiglia was from you. Right. Dan Cummins was from you. And like you would burn these CDs and I would listen and I would just like engulf this. And then you would be like, yo, man, you should come down to the club this week. And I remember the first time I saw Ted Alexandro because of you.
One of my favorites, man.
He was like, 10 hours there. I'm like, who the hell is that?
Man, I opened, if I'm not mistaken, I hosted for him that week and bombed terribly. And I was so embarrassed because he was one of my favorite stand-ups. But
yeah, you're like him. And I remember one time you were like, Ralph Harris is going to be. I'm like, who the hell is Ralph Harris?
Oh, he talk about a dude who's most formative for me. Ralph is like, man, I remember Ralph brought me from Tampa to go work his show that he was doing at the Orlando Improv.
Oh, okay.
And the owner of that club tried to stiff me for the work the weekend. And Ralph, to have it, like, for me, Ralph Harris was like a comedy god. I mean, he's still, in my opinion, like, as far as like, it's funny that you bring up Biglia, because I think like Ralph Harris was doing the more storytelling version of stand-up that is really popular nowadays with like Hassan Minaj and you know, like Neil Brennan. He was doing that shit long before it was popular.
Like these are like formative things when I seen it, because like I'd only really seen stand up done like a couple ways, because my exposure was my exposure. Right. So I remember seeing Ralph Harris the first time and like, like the emotional roller coaster he took you on. I'm like, dude,
he makes you cry.
People in tears, man.
He makes you cry right before hitting you with like the funniest shit you have ever heard in your life.
Dude was incredible, man.
But what I was saying was, he, like, this dude who was like a comedy god to me, went to bat and was like screaming at the club owners or at the manager at the Orlando Improv's fucking face inches from him, like an angry coach yelling at a baseball umpire about making sure that they pay me, saying that I'll never come back here, I'll never work here if you don't pay him. I mean, I was incredible. But anyways, well, that's very kind of you to say that I was at all formative, because it's for me, it's the other way around. For me, I saw you and I was like, man, he's got such a great perspective. His confidence on stage is really fantastic. I love the way you formulate jokes. I love the way that you were so comfortable with silence, which young comics are not comfortable with silence, and you were always so comfortable. And you showed me, and now I'm struggling, I feel like an asshole because I can't remember his name. You showed me a guy that you were really into that I think
Daryl
was like,
Lennox.
Oh my God, Daryl Lennox.
My best friend.
Holy shit, I haven't seen.
To this day.
Really? Daryl, we went to go see Daryl Lennox at Side Splitters.
Yeah.
And blew my fucking mind. And I remember changed my entire
free shout out, Daryl.
Dude, Daryl, can I say honestly, Daryl, you and I would have conversations about like how to formulate our sets and like what the hell we were doing on stage. Like, who are you on stage?
Yeah.
And it was all based on Daryl's perspective. And it was all based on like things that Daryl told you, and that, oh man, I haven't thought about that name in so long. Daryl, if you somehow are listening to this, you are fantastic. And I gotta get you on the pod one day soon just to talk and catch up. That is incredible. But anyways, all right, we're all over the place here. What I was getting at was we met around that time. I was like 25 or something. We were so engulfed in comedy. I could say that you were one of the people that I felt like was one of my closest friends for that few periods I was living in Tampa.
Oh man, that's cool, man.
But I feel like we never really got to know each other. Like we were very like stand-up friends, where it was like we wrote together. Right. You were one of the only stand-ups that I enjoyed having like as a writing partner, where you know we would just work on each other's shit, and I didn't feel like we were competing with one another. Like you were one of the few people in stand-up who actually helped make it better.
Wow, well, dude, I appreciate the compliment. I 100% agree. So like, hold on, I gotta turn down this baseball game. I was like, yo, the bottom of the ninth. The thing was so. Yeah, man. I remember going to your house a couple times because you live like close to the Veterans Expressway or something like that.
I lived in Lutz at the time, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, I've moved all over that fucking city, but yeah.
So I remember going to your house like a couple times, but like, you know, we definitely weren't like personal, like real tight friends, because, you know, I was like working full time and I was going to college. And then I started doing stand up my second year in college. So then the stand up started becoming a bigger thing, but you know, you're still trying to balance all these things. Sure. So like the idea of like free time, it just, you know, wasn't there. And then once I started comedy, it was like, it just kind of was, that's what I did, you know? So, yeah, man. I wish I would have. It's so weird because at the beginning, you know, it's career, you know, if you can call it that, it's like my idea was just work, get on stage, you get better, and then, you know, leave Florida behind me. That was the whole idea. Is like, I gotta get out of here, man.
Yeah.
So I was just work. And I did a terrible job at the beginning of my career, probably the first 5, like building relationships and sustaining relationships. Did it terrible, but it wasn't because like I was a bad person. I just didn't care. I was very singly focused.
Yeah, you were very funnel vision. I that was one thing I always remembered about you was even like, you know, car rides we would take if we would do like one-nighters someplace and we'd have to drive like an hour someplace. Like it was always comedy with the two of us. Like it was never much beyond the joke, the material, the moment, or like talking about people that we were meeting or you know, it was very of the moment. So it's crazy to think 100%. That I look back at my life. My life has been real chaptered, right? Where it was like based on who I lived around, like what city I lived, because I moved all over the goddamn country, not too dissimilar to you. And like, in the Florida chapter, like Kortney Shane Williams is this like, you know, one of the tent poles, and I don't know fucking shit about you. I have no idea where you're from. I don't know. Like you just told me now that you had a religious mother, or you said your mother was a
my mom's a minister.
She was a minister. The first time I'm ever hearing this.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, I had a whole personal life, you know, and I was very. It's weird, especially with my mom being a minister. Like, I mean, you know, hopefully she doesn't listen to this, but like. When I'm recording, performing something, I don't curse. And I've never because she went to shows, I don't do sex jokes, I don't do masturbation jokes. I you know, and then I just writing, and that makes it a little bit tougher, especially at the beginning, right?
Yeah, of course.
So, but once you start getting in the routine, it just doesn't really matter. Now it sets me up for other things that I do now, which is great. Right. But yeah, I never did that because, you know, of my mom. But the personal part of like me, I really kept completely separate from the stage, like completely separate. I'm talking about a little more personal stuff now. But
as you get older,
completely separate.
You start having shared life experiences with your audience members. Yeah. And so it's hard to not pull from that and utilize, you know, those experiences. But where did you grow up in Florida? Is that where you're from?
Moved to Florida. My family moved to Florida when I was 10 years old. So,
gotcha. So where'd you grow up?
Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh, you're from Ohio.
Yeah, Cleveland, Ohio. And then my dad was in real estate. So moved to Florida in 1993. Right. Because, you know, 93 moved to Brandon, Florida. You know what that is.
Sure. Yeah.
Outside of Tampa, there was like nothing. There was no mall. There was no nothing. So he did
like 3 used car dealerships, and that's Brandon, Florida.
That was it. And so they did some apartment complex stuff in Temple Terrace. Now I'm getting local. See that?
That's fine.
In Temple Terrace. So they did some apartment complexes, whatever. And then we got to Florida, and then the rest is the rest.
Right. And your mom was a minister. Your dad was a real estate dude. Were they like, oh yeah, comedy? Sure. That's just nuts.
I mean, at the time, you know, I was super introverted. Moving around a lot, especially as a kid, makes you super introverted. And even looking back on it now, of course. So like, you know, at 4th grade is basically we move halfway through the 4th grade, right? And most of the people you become friends with, right? They tend to be friends like in grade school, then maybe middle school, and then it whittles away. But by the time you've probably been with the same groups of people, maybe
12 years,
15 years, right?
Yeah, depending on how long
we moved to Florida. So from the time the time I hit like 4th grade, I went to the 1, 2, 3, 4.
Jesus.
By the time we graduated, you know, I'm probably at 4 schools, 2 private schools. Wow. So there's no carryover when you get there. So when I get to 7th grade, that's the first time ever going to public school. You do that for 2 years, then you go to high school. So
you were in private school too for the first 7?
Yeah, I went to Christian school until I was in 7th grade.
Oh my goodness.
So then when you go to public school, none of those people are there. You know what I mean?
And it's also probably like a real shock to your system.
Oh, I'm like, these people are out of control. I was like, I'll never get in trouble. Yeah, I was quote troublemaker like in private school.
Really? Which is probably a low bar though for a private school.
Yeah. I mean, there's only 10 kids in the class. It's very easy to single out the one of the 10.
Yeah. I was a real troublemaker. I went to school one time and my tie wasn't ironed properly. Yeah, real troublemaker.
Yeah. So
you go to private school at 7 years old. And it's a massive culture shock. And are you do you become like a wallflower because exactly
so that's kind of what happens because I came from some means. I mean, my parents ain't rich, but I'm one of 4 kids and everybody went to private school. Like that's not free.
Right.
So I came from some means. So going into that environment, you got to figure out like where you kind of, slide in. But then you have like cultural things, not just racial, but you have economic cultural things, right?
Right.
And in the school I went to was like a brand new school. So it was a lot of things that just converge at the same time. So you don't really find, for me, like a comfortable space.
Right.
So then what happens is you just become fading in. So there's people I went to school that have no clue who I was, what my name, nothing,
Yeah.
Very just, very distant. And so it was very easy for me, for your first point, it was very easy for me to get on stage because, most people are like, oh, I'm being embarrassed, but I didn't know anybody. So I was never embarrassed. I was never to take some challenge. So when I told my parents, hey, I'm going to do comedy, their reaction was probably like, wow, really? Like almost disbelief in some way. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to a club this weekend. They're like, when? I was like, it's in like a couple days. And they were like, what? How did you figure this? I was like, well, but I never really answered to a group. So it wasn't like, hey, throw some stuff to my friends and see what, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. No,
it was never that. I went to the club
you don't have the
myself.
preconceived, there's no preconceived notions of one, everybody's being like, you're so funny, you should do comedy, which is the worst thing that anybody can tell another human being, by the way.
Yeah.
And also no preconceived notions of like failing in front of friends and then being you didn't know embarrassment, which is the best way to start a stand-up career.
Right.
Is to have no experience with a group of people staring at you and being like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
But were you into like what kind of shit were you? I mean, you said you have 3 brothers. This is the first I'm learning about this too.
No, I'm one of 4. I got one brother and 2 sisters.
1 brother, 2 sisters. Where do you fall in the birth order?
I'm second. I have an older sister, me and my brother in the middle. Now the youngest is my other sister.
How like what are the age differences between everybody? Are you all pretty close?
We're all 3 years apart. My
Got it.
youngest sister is 2 years from my brother.
Right on. So it's all pretty, that's a pretty standard break I find in like families where it's always like 2 or 3 years apart in each.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm assuming you grew up in a fairly religious household based on the fact that mom's a minister and, everybody is in private school. I'm now connecting a dot between you being like, oh man, Jake was this gateway to comedy that I wasn't aware of.
Exactly.
Like I'm seeing the way that thread draws there. But what kind of shit were you guys into as kids?
Yo, man, I came from like the funniest house in the world, dude. My uncle is hilarious, man. Hilarious. This is my grandmother's brother. The funniest person in the family.
Yeah.
My grandmother is hilarious, dude. Hilarious, man. So in my house, like everything was not like jocular humor though.
Sure.
So not like that because, it's still a very conservative household, but I mean, hilarious dude, like anybody, you can make fun of my dad or you can make fun of my mom or, what is that? So it's like, if I'm with my brother, it's just nonstop. Right. My brother he has a son. My brother has a son. So I just make fun of his son nonstop. You know what I mean? So that was the environment that I grew up in.
Maybe that's why you and I got along so well in Florida, because the natural New Yorker in me, and also like my family's the same way. My family, everybody's a ball buster. Like we spend all day showing our love for one another by cutting each other down in the funniest way possible.
So this is the coldest thing. So this is like, my stand-up background. So Comic View was a big deal. This is, Black culture. It's a big deal.
Sure.
So I remember watching Comic View. So if we watch it, it comes on late. So I remember my mom was like, hey, when they start cursing, it's going off. It's
wow.
It. So we'd watch and they're going to curse. So you're just like,
sure.
Please,
yeah. You're like,
get 3 minutes. You know?
Hold on as long as you can.
So we're like fiending for this. It's me and my brother. So 3 minutes. And then boom, curse, boom, go off. So I remember watching it, and then my parents would go to bed, and me and my brother would watch. And I'm like, this is when I'm like in high school. And my brother was like, and we were like, man, that was funny, but he should have said this. oh, that's funny, but
Right.
he should have did it like this.
You
So
started analyzing.
I didn't even think like this. He was like, no. I was like, you know what? That they didn't laugh that much in the audience, but if he'd have did that joke later in the show, I'm telling you, man, it'd just been a better thing. So what I would do is after my parents went to bed, I'd put a tape in there, a VCR tape, and I'd record and put it on the channel. So then when I wake up in the morning, I have this, but you can't stop the recorder, right? So I have this thing. So I would rewind it to the place that was blank still, and then I record the next line. So eventually I had this tape full of stand-up.
Right.
And I remember that's how I got in. And this before I even started stand-up. I had these tapes. Right. So when I started doing it, this was like kind of my education of like, this is how you do stuff. This is how I formulate. So I remember when I started stand-up, I was 20 when I first went on stage. Start working, and like, you know, everybody's like, oh, you're good. You know, this is Florida too. So people that do comedy in Florida, at least at that time, you don't really stay in it very long because you got to make money to do it. So you don't stay in it very long unless you get like a job at the Improv or something like that. Most people do it as a hobby. It's not like professional. And if you're good, you don't stay here very long. So I remember like doing it, and then people like, oh, you're good, whatever. But I was like, I would listen, and then Daryl was my best friend. So I was like, why did my jokes not sound like that one? So then I remember like diagnosing comedy specials, just like an outline, just diagnosing it and figuring out what was this, what was that. So then when I met you, and then you came with this other thing of comedy, it let me know like there's other ways you can do it. So those times are like super influential for me, man. Yeah. That was like really how it really got going.
And can I tell you, we could not have had different upbringings as far as like the conservative nature of things. Like my mother was, my oldest sibling is 11 years older than me. So imagine your break from your youngest to the oldest, right?
Wow.
But different fathers, and just she's a single mother by the time I'm around, and she's working all the time. She's burnt. My mom is done raising children. I was like a real latchkey kid. There was never any, what are you watching? What is this? Like there was none of that. There was zero policing of what I saw. So I grew up seeing, I remember being like a real, I don't know what year it was that like Dennis Leary's No Cure for Cancer came out, but like the year that came out, I was listening to it, and I'm sure I was like 9 or 11. And also the foul language and curse words were not foreign in our family either. But here's the thing though, same regardless of the fact that maybe I didn't have the overwatcher that you did, being like no, the second these curse words start, it's over. I did the exact same thing though. I VHS taped the reason I had all the DVDs and all the CDs I would burn is because I collected stand-up comedy in any form. I had, if of course now the world exists in which you turn on like the Comedy Central app and you can watch every single Comedy Central Presents. Yeah. Back in the day, it wasn't that way. I literally would VHS tape every single Comedy Central Presents, like the Comedy Central half hour.
Yeah.
I had just boxes of VHS tapes, and then eventually technology advanced to where I was able to burn DVDs, and I was like, I could DVR it and then burn the DVR playback to a DVD. I had like, this whole bootleg system, but it was the same way where I was like a student of it at a young age, and I was very analytical of it. But I don't think I was ever as analytical as you. I think for me, it was always more about the performance, which is why, and he's sort of a punchline now, like it's kind of a bummer. I feel like, a lot of people have written off Dane Cook in more recent years, but like, I feel like as much as Dane Cook could become a punchline and his career sort of, tanked and then he's kind of come back a little bit, like the dude reinvented like stand-up performance. And for me, that was everything. And in fact, man, if I can only imagine when we were hanging out, the stand-up I was doing at that time, it was probably like,
I remember all of it. I remember a lot of it.
Oh my God. I do not have that memory, but it was at least 20% it was 20% a Dane Cook impression, 20% an impression of somebody else, 20, like it was very much me, kind of not having my own voice and me just like still doing my own material, but in the voice of somebody else. And I remember, I think it was because of Daryl, we once had a conversation, and it was a talk about like formative years, where you were like, if you had your entire set, and you told me like, if you had one sentence like to sum up your entire set, what would that one sentence be? And I remember that so vividly because,
like
and it would be, and it would become the thing that you would reiterate through your material. It would be like,
yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I remember the thing at the time that I came up with was because, I'm a teetotaler. I don't drink. I was never really big into any like drug use. Not that I got anything against it. It was just not my bag. Wasn't for me. I was not really a party guy. Like I was sort of a nerd. And I remember I hung on to the phrase, I'm an innocent man in a deviant world. I hung on to that. And I was like, I'm going to try to build a whole set around that. And so no matter what my material would be, no matter what the bit I was doing, I'd try to come back to that line and figure out a way to reset every time. Yeah. And honestly, I didn't hang on to that for very long, but it shaped it. Yeah, we're wordsmiths here. It shaped all of the comedy that I would do after that. And like when I moved to LA and I actually curated what a set was, in a proper set, like what I was actually, who I was as a person versus the character I was playing on stage. All That's of that comes from that era. But anyways, man, yeah. So you went to college in Florida, which again didn't know that at the time that you were in class. I don't think I knew that at least when we were hanging out. What were you going to school for?
I went to school to be an architect. So like,
oh shit, yeah. And where'd you go? See,
I went to USF.
Remember, USF.
USF at the time they had the only architecture program in the state. So I applied to it was kind of my safe school. I actually wanted to go to Ohio State. It's the school I wanted to go to, obviously.
You want to go back home.
Yeah, you know what I mean, in sports and all that, but it was expensive, So I remember the people like calling the house, like, hey, we can help you with some scholarships. And I think it was like, but now it wouldn't be that much, right? It was like, I think it was like $45,000 a year or something. I was like, whoa, that's probably way more than that.
That's what kept me going. That's what kept me from going to the decent acting school I wanted to go to in New York City. It was that exact price. And I was like, nope, that's too much. Can't act that.
Man. So I remember I could have got in, but I remember my brother who's right behind me. And I'm like, yeah, he's a much better educational investment than me. And I went to USF for free because in Florida, if you have a certain GPA, Bright Future Scholarship. So I never paid for school. I went to school for free.
Wow.
And they had the only architecture program. And it was a 5 years master program. So I remember I was like, I'm going to be an architect anyway. So I went to my brother. My brother actually ended up going to Georgetown. So if I would have went to Ohio State, chances are Georgetown may never happen. Or maybe you get student loans. So maybe it didn't matter. But so I went to USF and after the first year, lost the scholarship that I had because that's a long story. But I was working a full-time job, so they had tuition reimbursement. So I was still going to school for free. I'd never paid for school. And in my second year, while I was working a full-time job, that's when I got into stand-up. You know, so at that point, the school part was done. I was still going. I was still doing everything I had to do, but I was like, man, I got to get out of here. I got to move to New York. You know how it is, man.
Did you? Yeah.
I gotta become a superstar, man. Y'all are holding me back. I got to get to New York.
Did you graduate?
I remember they only had masters. There was no degree. You know what I mean?
Got it.
So they were like, oh, switch major. So as soon as I started stand up, I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna do like business or communications or something
to get out of there.
Yeah, and then they were like,
you were literally like in prison trying to get a less sentence.
So then they were like, I was like, I'm moving in January, and then I remember the guidance counselor was like, you should finish it, and I'm like, no. And she goes, well, you know what you do? She was like, you already have the credits. I think I like got maybe a year and a half left or something, maybe a year. She was like, you already have the credits for like an associate's. She was like, if you just sign it, we'll just do it. So they mailed it to the house. So I have an associate's degree, but it's somewhere in the attic somewhere. I don't know.
real. And
when it came in, I was in New York when it came in. My dad was like, your degree should have at the house, man. But I don't have like a bachelor's. But I have that.
Were you an art student? Like, were you? When I think of architecture, I think of art. Is that a dumb thing? Is that naive of me?
Well, not really, because in college you take a lot of fabrication classes, but there's a lot of history of arts. But then there's a lot of like drafting, like that type of stuff. So it's more like layout, floor plan type.
Got it.
I'm really into numbers. I love numbers. I've always been great at math. I love math. Like I took calculus in high school. Like I love numbers. I love numbers. I love numbers. I love budgets. I love numbers. I love, everything. I remember when I found out, how to calculate like standard deviations and how to take, I remember when I took statistics. It was like one of my favorite classes ever.
Wow.
I love numbers.
Wow.
So,
well, I look forward to getting my taxes that you're going to do for me now.
Well, I don't.
You put that shit out there. That shit's out there now. I love numbers. Is that why? Because I know that you're also a big sports fan, and I know that when it comes to sports, like you're a big statistics guy. Numbers. You like the fine details of it.
I like fantasy baseball. Yeah. It's numbers. But I like fantasy baseball too.
So how did numbers jump to architecture? Was it because it is sort of a big math problem a lot of times?
Yeah. In high school, the high school I went to, they had drafting classes. So I did like a year of drafting in high school before I got to college. And I was like, so I remember going to church and there was an architect at church. And just kind of figure out which one to do. I know I didn't want to have like a job. I wanted to have flexibility. In every point in my life, always want to have, because I'm like, you never know. I might need to get out of here. You know what I mean?
I think you and I are
always want to have flexibility.
Yeah, we're cut from that same cloth where no matter what it was never going to be a 9-to-5 accountant kind of thing. Like always. It was just, yeah.
And even when I did have a 9-to-5, I woke up and went to work every day knowing I could quit today.
Right.
Like I don't have any, I've never bought a new car. I've never bought anything that I couldn't take the money, except I bought a house after I got married. But
sure.
I never bought anything that I couldn't take the money out of my pocket and pay for it. Never.
Right.
So never had a credit card until I was like 26,
Yeah, same.
So yeah, when we went to church, there was an architect there and I like numbers. And he was like, yeah, you kind of like contract work almost,
Right.
So you kind of project to try. I'm like, oh, so you can basically be done when you want to be done, or, you work for a firm or thing. So then that really gravitated me towards that. So that's how that love of numbers and math or whatever came into play of like, oh, I can do this. And then when I started getting into it in high school, I loved it. If even to this second, if somebody said you have to quit stand-up, but you can be an architect, I probably would take the switch.
That would be
now.
That's the one.
I still like it.
That's your career hall pass.
Yeah, I still like it. Like it.
And that's the sort of thing that I'm assuming mom and dad were fully supportive of.
Sure.
Seems like a real good, nice, safe. Maybe
I was
make
such
a lot of money.
Secretive. This is not the podcast. I was such a secretive kid, though. I was so secretive. I was very introverted. The moving around thing definitely played a part in it.
Right.
But I was just such a secretive kid, so I don't think they exactly knew like what's going on. But I was very self-sufficient in a lot of ways.
Wow.
Very low maintenance in some ways too, but probably maybe too secretive. So there's a lot of things that they're probably like, I guess he got it. I mean, I don't know how he's doing it, but I guess he got it.
I think if it is anything, in my experiences and doing this podcast, just getting to talk to a bunch of people about their lives and about families and stuff like that, and then just other, like cousins that I have and other people who have a different household experience than I did, which was, even though I have a bunch of siblings, I was still kind of an only child. Like I was so much later, everybody was out of the house. I feel like for you, having your siblings all being kind of tight knit, even though you were moving around, I bet you the fact that you had your siblings with you probably aided you in being kind of self-sufficient and also being kind of low maintenance, because I bet you a lot of the things that your parents would have had to have dealt with if you were an only child, your siblings dealt with. It was all like internal. Like I've noticed that people who have like I would say 3 or more siblings almost have this separate little family where it's like, yeah, we have our greater family with our mom and our dad and whatever. But then like the siblings themselves are kind of this little family where they work out their shit together. They do their own problem solving. They're their own little country, or their own little city in a country.
Sure.
I don't wonder if that, maybe kind of helped you with becoming sort of that like self-sufficient, secret kid.
I don't know. I mean, dude, the moving around was just crazy. The racism was different in Florida. So when I went to private school in Florida, I was still kind of at that age where like, you want to kind of have friends. But then we moved into this community. The first community we lived in, it had like 5 houses. This house was huge, like 5 houses. And like, there were no kids on the block. So when we moved in a neighborhood with kids, it's like, getting called the N-word and that shit was like, And then private school was like the same way.
Brandon, Florida too. I didn't even really think about that.
I mean, it was 93, it was different, man.
Were you the only black family in Brandon, Florida at the time?
In my neighborhood, so we lived in one house for like a year. Then when we moved to like the house.
Sure, yeah.
In that community, when I was a kid, there was one other black family in there. And they had a son, and that's it. And that was it. That was the thing. So like it was a weird constant fight.
Shit.
But my brother and sister are much more gregarious than I am. So like they probably had whatever they dealt with what they dealt with, right?
Right.
My sister was older too. So once you get to high school, it's just a different thing, So it's weird getting not emotional, but it's like
no, this is
you try to be like friends with people, right. But then it's almost like they kind of let you down. So then not your guards up, motherfucker. Man, my mom's gonna hear this. Yo, every day I would fight people, fist fight every day. I remember fighting a dude at the bus and like bringing a brick to the bus stop to fuck this guy up.
Jeez.
That's one of the fights I lost. And I remember I'm fighting, and I remember my dad showed up while I'm fighting this dude. He's like, God. Yo, what, you know what I mean? And like, it kind of like gets me up or whatever. And I remember like getting suspended, and I remember the whole thing. But the bottom line is like, yo, I will fight you every day. But that, that's tiring emotionally. So eventually you just withdraw. Right. It's like, yo, just withdraw. It's obviously y'all don't want me to be in your group. I'm cool, man.
And this is early high school?
Makes you withdrawn.
This is early high school?
This is from the time we moved to Florida.
Right. Wow.
This is like
since the time you were 10, really.
Yeah, man, all day. So going to public school, especially when I got to high school, it was kind of a relief in a way, because now there's more black kids. So now there's more, at least some people you can intertwine with. So my circle in high school is probably like 2 people. And I did everything. I was play sports, the whole thing. But yeah, so that part probably made me more self-sufficient even at other things, because my parents didn't necessarily know every single thing that was going on. But they knew I was get suspended. They knew I would fight. They knew like my dad was
they were getting the letters and the phone calls from school and shit, I'm sure.
Yeah, my dad was like, you do what you got to do, man. You know what I mean? Wow. That's what it is. My dad didn't necessarily encourage fighting. He didn't condone it, but he was like, yo.
But I mean,
just not gonna let somebody just disrespect you, man.
And his own experiences, I'm sure, played into,
Yeah, because my dad is like, that was like real racism. Like the stories he told me is like real, because my dad was a very good black basketball player. So, he was from the east side of Cleveland. So he was so good, he went to the west side. The west side was more white people. Sure. But he was good at basketball. Right. He was like, yo, man, that was like the stories he told me. That was like the real stuff. So this is,
sure, but don't
raise me. So
sure. I mean, and I know that's like you trying to put it into perspective, but don't discount your own experience either, because dealing with racist assholes, dealing with races, like
it was real, man. This is not the show, man.
Man, it is the show. It is the show. It is the show.
And like I knew, like it's like I'm not stupid at 10. Like I knew. Plus my dad, I knew, man. So like when we come, for instance, we go play. I was good at sports. I was good. You know what I mean? I wasn't like LeBron, but I was good.
But you were an athlete. Yeah,
I played high school varsity. I was good. So as you play as kids, because we still would play outside. But whenever I would come around, like, oh, we're going to whoever's house, so let's go to their house. And their parents was like, hey, you guys got to go outside. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So, but about the third time, I go to the house and they're playing video games. It's like, hey, you guys need to go outside. I'm like, yo, when I show up, everybody has to go outside, dude. It's like, I'm picking this up, dude. Dude. Even as a kid, and there were certain families that were cool, but we always, you know what I mean? So like subtle things like that. But there were definitely some kids on the block that were like really, really, really cool, really good dudes. That like some of them I still talk to now, but the circle of kids is like 20. So if like 2 out of 20 are good, it's so yeah, that part really made me withdraw, and that definitely made me more like self-sufficient. Like I'm not going to depend on none of these dudes for anything.
Right? Do you think that that's had long-term like trust issues? Like, do you think that that's affected any long-term trust issues?
Trust issues? I don't think so.
I guess it wouldn't be trust issues as much as it would just be that sort of like keeping a wall up and being kind of distant because it's not so much as people let you down as much as you learned to not bother in the first place.
I think you know what, and that's the part, like at the beginning of my career, like not being very good at building friendships or building things. You know what I mean? I think about like, oh, I used to work for this club and this club, things like that, which doesn't matter now. But at the time, when you realize like, oh, I need to work the road. Hey, all those people I met at the Improv, it'd have been nice to like actually be friendly and follow up. But I didn't think, because that part probably affects. So I guess if that's, but the idea of being friends with somebody was foreign to me.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I can't speak to like what a fucking inherent racism did to my psyche, because there wasn't any, right? But we were similar in the sense where like I tend to only latch on to the one person. Like I've never been in a friends group my entire life. I have like a friend who is in a group of their own, and I know that dude, or and then I know this girl from this other group, but I'm not in any of those. Like I tend to latch on to the 2% that I see is like, all right. I mean, that's kind of how I feel like we were in Florida, where there was a lot of other dudes there doing stand up, but I always felt like it was like, yeah, okay, cool, we'll do shows or I'll book with them, but like Kortney's the one guy who I actually like want to work on stuff with. And like, I feel like you and I were very similar in that sense, at least for whatever reasons, mine all just all come from familial shit, is the reason I ended up similar to this, where I like kind of keep people at arm's distance and I kind of like a little bit of a loner.
That's probably a thing with a lot of comics though. But then there are definitely some comics that are gregarious. Cats are just like they're doing their act on you. It's like, yo, man, turn it off, man. Yeah. Like take a day off. That's the worst, man. That is. You just took our conversation on stage. Like, I thought we were just talking.
Right. That is really rough.
I thought we were just talking, man. Hey, man. So that's different, man.
But when you started doing stand up and you changed your architecture master's to a associates in business. Would you say it was business? Is that what you said you did?
Oh, I was like communications or something like that.
Yeah. And you were like, all right, hey, so comedy's going to be the thing. How did mom and dad react to that? The actual change versus the, hey, I'm going to start to do this thing. Because I feel like it's easy to be supportive of like the fun hobby your kid has. But
so my sister went to college before me, and she became a personal trainer. She lives in Miami now.
Okay.
So she went to USF too. I don't know if she graduated or not. So I think I was already the second one. So I think at that point they were like, well, he goes to school for free. And then my brother's right behind me, and he just got into Georgetown. So maybe by that time they're figuring out like, hey, we've put him in this situation. I mean, I want to do the same thing for my daughter. Basically, my dad grew up poor. My mom still grew up in rougher neighborhoods. So maybe they're like, yo, this is kind of our plan to give them this education. So then they don't have to do necessarily. So maybe that's what they're thinking. But I never like announced that, hey, this architecture is not for me. It was never a thing. Right. I was working a full-time job. I was going to school full-time. They never paid a penny for it. Right. And, I was healthy. I wasn't, doing drugs. It was nothing.
Right.
It wasn't nothing. So when I started, now I knew afterwards, but when I moved to New York City, that's, I think, when the thing got real. When I went to New York City, that's when they were like, what?
Now,
so, yeah, man, I'm gonna do comedy. And that hit them like a bomb. I didn't know at the time, but since then, me and my mom have had conversations. She was like, I could not believe it. She was like, I was blown away. I was like, how are you going to do this? And you had all these plans. And I was like, when did you figure this out? So I think that's when it really bum rushed them.
Right. Did you go to New York from Florida? Because I remember you going to Seattle from Florida. Am I wrong?
Seattle came out a long time after that. I went to New York from Seattle. From Florida.
Okay, got you.
Yeah, I went from New York to New York from Florida.
What year is that?
That was wild. That was 2009. Or
so that was
2007, my bad. It's 2007.
So it was 2 years, just 2 years prior to for me coming out to LA. So so that's crazy to me. I think that there were 2 years I was in Florida doing stand up after you had already left.
Yeah, 2007.
It's probably why I blocked those years out. It's because you weren't there anymore.
I don't even. Yeah, I'm trying to.
But
think
that's crazy. Because
Yeah,
but then
when I
you did
I don't
end
know.
up.
I don't remember talking to anybody really from Florida.
Dude,
I don't.
it-
I don't remember.
Can I say
It was a
like
whirlwind.
I do have a memory of you just like vanishing into the sunset. Like
That's exactly
it
how I
was-
did.
Yeah,
I just vanished. I was just gone. There was no announcement. There was no press release. Once again,
You didn't call in.
better.
You didn't call
But
in the local
when
radio
people
station.
move, they're like, "Hey, I'm moving to LA." It's like you're coming back. Just please don't do the party thing.
Sure.
I'm moving. It was. I didn't even know like you announced it. I didn't.
But dude,
who am I
that's
gonna
what
tell?
makes it's that sort of behavior that I think has allowed you to continue doing what you're doing. Like you and I are also cut from that same cloth where we both know shame and we both we have shame. We have we are allowed to be embarrassed. And I feel like we both have seen a lot of people do things where you go like, what are you doing? Just go do the thing. Like be the thing. Stop telling us you're the thing and be it.
Yeah, man. It's yeah.
So you ended up in New York for a little while. How long did you live there before you ended up to Seattle?
So I lived in New York.
I assumed that you were just a Seattle guy.
So long story short, I lived in New York for about the first time about 4 months.
Oh, wow.
4 months, and then I ran out of money. And then I was staying in this house, and the lady's nephew was stealing all my stuff, and I'm like, this dude's stealing from me. And then I moved to Cleveland. So my grandmother stayed. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna do comedy in Cleveland. So I had all these shows booked. I worked the Improv there. And the guy, because the owner of the Improv in Tampa,
Bob.
So Bob, yeah, he's from Cleveland.
Yeah, nicest dude ever. Nicest comedy club manager that's ever existed.
Right. So then when I moved to Florida, his name was Lee something. I forgot his last name. He's like, oh yeah, Bob, I know him. So it was like great. So I got into Improv in Cleveland. Boom, did like an open mic, come back that night. So I do the show that night. It was like a Wednesday, Thursday. You know how they do.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm in.
Oh,
so I'm like, great. So then I had these other shows, and then it was like middle of the summer. So like all these shows dried up. They were like, oh, they don't have events. So shows were gone. So all I had was like the Improv, and they, breaking into like the weekend on the Improv is hard.
Yeah, no.
Man.
That is more. I always tell people that, like, especially people in LA here, and I'm not sure how it is in New York since it's been so long since I've lived there, obviously, but I'm assuming it's very similar in the sense where it's like you guys have a different brand of comedy than like everywhere else in the country is a completely different brand of comedy because it's more of it's more comedy theater everywhere else, where it's like you got your headliner who's there for the week. And then you've got like your one local dude who's hosting, and then the feature who's usually brought or somebody.
Right.
But in LA, it's like, oh, I went to the Improv and I saw 20 people tonight. And I'm like, yeah, those opportunities don't exist in Cleveland or Tampa or Minnesota
100%.
or St. Louis. Yeah, wherever the hell you are.
And the first time I knew a comedy club was open 7 days a week is when I went to Seattle.
Right.
I was like, what? So you do comedy on Tuesday?
Right. Yeah, Monday. Like, there's no Monday and Tuesday. Nothing's funny on a Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah, man. So there was like 3 nights,
Yeah.
And so so then after that I had no money. So I was like, So I stayed with my grandmother. That was one of the coolest times of my life, just staying with my grandmother. And then I was like, I'm gonna go down to Miami. So sister lives in Miami. So now I'm making it. So I go down to Miami, I do a couple shows.
We went all the way back down to Florida. I never even knew this.
And then my buddy Daryl was like, yo, I got this feature spot in Seattle. They're like, cool, man. I have nothing else to do. So I remember borrowing like $100 from my mom and flew to Seattle. Did these shows in Seattle. And this is at the end of 2007. I remember I made $700. It was the most money I ever made in my life.
Right.
I'd worked like whatever, Wednesday through Sunday.
Sure.
And I was like, oh my gosh. I met comics that did comedy for a living that were not famous. The first time I knew you could do that.
Right. Like that was a thing.
I was like, what do you do? It's like a stand-up. He's like, yeah. I was like, what? So like, how do you pay? Like, where's your job? They was like, yo, I was like, hold on. You're not famous. So now you're like measuring yourself up against. Right. So I'm like, but like, you've been doing comedy how long? So now I'm like, oh, and that's boom. I was hooked. That's what I'm moving to Seattle.
Again, like we did lose touch pretty abruptly. I feel obviously I didn't even know you were in New York. That's how much we lost touch. But I do vividly remember, maybe it was just one of those times where we just like randomly wrote a Facebook message or some shit like that, or we just like texted. I do remember you like falling in love with Seattle, which is maybe that's why I associate you with it, where you were just like, man, and I think you even told me like, you got to come up to Seattle. You got to come up.
Even to this time, because the other thing too is like Seattle's, it's one of the greatest art cities. I think it's the best stand-up city, period. I just think it is.
So my favorite crowd ever was, so when I moved to LA, I went and I did like a 2-week stint in a couple random clubs. I did some shows at the Comedy Underground, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
That is my favorite audience I've ever had. Like that audience, the Comedy Underground, will join you in any task and any journey you want to take them. Yeah.
I remember I did like spots there, and I'm like, you can like write on stage. I'm like, these people are like, they're like in it. It was like crazy. I'm like, man, I can take all these chances. And then, then it's like, yo, I get paid, and then I'm getting like better. And then I'm like, yo, dog, I'm good. And it's still one of the places where everybody still wants to move to LA, New York. Sure. Like, great. More time for me. Just y'all keep moving out. Right. I'm good.
Right.
So then, man. So then that was it. And I lived in Seattle, but basically off and on for like the next 10 years.
Wow.
For the next 10 years.
Where are you now?
I live in Florida now.
You're back in Florida again.
Yes.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Oh, the vicious circle. I live less than a mile. Well, about a mile from the Improv.
Wait, in Tampa?
Funny. Yes.
You're back in Tampa right now?
Yes.
Holy shit.
Yes, I'm talking to you from the heart of the super spreader. I'm live.
Oh my God. I had no idea you were back in Tampa. Do you work the Improv ever?
You know what? Right before the pandemic started, I did friend of mine, Hannibal was at Improv, and I'd only been back for like maybe a couple months. I'm like, yo, dude, I'm trying to get in that club. He was like, oh, just come down and do some spots. So then I met, Bob was there. Everybody was,
wait, Bob is still managing it?
Bob is still there, dude.
Holy shit, that's amazing.
Still there. And then, so do it great. So it's like, so I started like, I want to come down to open mic. I went to open mic, and yo, man, I was about to blow my head off, man. It's like, this is terrible. It's terrible because now my perspective is so different now.
Yep.
They put everybody up at open mic, which is fine. I get it. I get the whole thing. But then some people go up there and they're just playing around. It's like, yo, dude, the only reason I'm here is to try to get in the club. And like, I don't mind if you play around. Just do it at the mindset. Like, you know what I mean? Because now I'm married. I have a child. I have a house. It's like, yo, dude, I'm taking time out of, see, now I'm the old bitter comic. I'm taking time out of my life, and you're bullshitting, dude. Yeah. Like, stop messing around, man.
What you're describing is a large part of, I think, what sort of ended my long relationship with stand-up is there's a lot. You'd be surprised, but in LA, that's
I can imagine. I remember doing a showcase in LA, and it was for stand-up, some stand-up to diversity, something like that.
Sure.
Yo, this lady was doing her acting reel. I'm like, what are you doing, man? This is not comedy.
The amount of people who are like trying to get acting jobs and whose agents and managers are like, oh, you should go do stand-up. It
makes sense.
I had, going back to the whole like trying to find a group and trying to find people that you can latch onto. When I moved to LA, I had 0 friends. It was as simple as that. Like, and I had some stand-up friends. Like, I don't know if you remember Patrick. You remember Patrick from Florida? Patrick
Melton?
Yeah.
Yo, we worked together like a year ago. Really? No. Right before, of all places, because I was like, man, I'm about to reconnect, moving back to Florida.
Right.
I'm like, yo, I don't work any clubs.
Right, yeah.
Where the hell, you know what I mean? Because so much of my work came from the Pacific Northwest.
Sure, yeah.
I did well. But I'm like, now what I'm going to do, so I'm like, dude, got to go to the Bible Belt, you know what I mean? Yep. So I'm looking at Oklahoma and all these places. Randomly, we're in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Oh, you'll love this story. We're in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the Looney Bin. Guess who is the owner, GM owner of the Looney Bin? You're not going to guess.
Remember, it's not Gary Menke, is it?
Oh my God! Not even for that. That actually is better.
I don't know. That was where you were. The way that you set that up, I was like, this is the only person's name who I would not laugh at right now. But all right,
do you remember Ron Johnson?
Ron or Roy?
Roy
Johnson. Roy? Yes.
I walk in and I'm like, it's like, yo, contact Roy. I'm like, Roy, what? So then, boom. So Patrick Melton's headlining the club,
right?
And I'm doing a feature spot, and Roy owns the club. I'm like, yo, what the heck is going on here, dude?
What weird Tampa comedy circle is happening in Tulsa, Oklahoma?
So then, So that's the last time I saw Patrick Melton, dude. And he was like running the town. He doesn't even live there. I was like,
when I moved to LA, he came like a year later, right? He came like, and so like he was around, and like, I still consider the guy a close friend, but we just don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, right? And as much as I love the dude, he's one of those guys who's kind of always on, like we were talking about, And I just didn't feel like doing. I didn't feel like he was like a friend in stand up. Do you know what I mean? Like he would do a show, and like he was kind enough to book me on like his podcast he's been doing for years. Like he booked me on like the show that they did at the Improv, and like it was kind. But outside of him, really, I didn't have friends in stand up. I had people that I knew who were stand-ups, but would take my spot in a second if they could, and who didn't really want to see me succeed, and who didn't want to.
Thing.
Yeah, and
probably LA thing.
And honestly, it sort of like slowly just grained at me where I ended up, I went from doing 5-6 nights a week to doing. So
let me ask you a question.
To doing one a month, to just kind of being like, I never officially quit, but I'm still not doing stand-up,
So I know this is your show, but let me ask you a question. So like, do you think that is changing in like a place like Los Angeles? I mean, I'm sure there's people with the same stories, right?
Right.
Do you think that's like changing at all, especially like, coming now out of COVID and whatnot? And also the people that like take spots, let's say whoever took your spot, like, are they actually getting anything like out of it? Or is it just a rat race, right? You're just trying to be the strongest rat of the rat. I don't know, right?
No, like, you're right. But I do think, so here's my thought process is I think, and this isn't just stand up, I think this is going to be musicians and freaking actors and anybody who's doing anything creative. I think that, the pandemic was like the Great Flood. Okay. And it washed everything away. Everybody died in the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, there's a few people who built arcs and figured out a way to survive this shit. But for the most part, I think the pandemic washed everything away, and it re-solidified the internet's position in the way people consume their art and their comedy. Right. And I hope, this is a hope that I have, that in what Alexandra, my girl, is hoping will be the next Roaring 20s. She thinks that she thinks that the Roaring 20s that's coming up is going to be this like big resurgence of actual challenging art that is like game changing, and that all of the people who found success on the internet and that found that they could leave the stage and just be on the internet are not going to, they're not coming back. Like why are you going to put
interesting theory?
Listen,
that's an interesting theory.
I got pajamas on right now talking to you doing this podcast. If I had no drive, why would I put pants on to put something out into the internet again, right? So I think that what's going to happen is I think this pandemic and everything has sort of weeded out everybody who's not really putting in the work. Who, like you said, people that are doing it in Tampa who are only going to be doing it for a year, maybe, that kind of thing. I think the pandemic has weeded a lot of those people off of the stages, out of the actual live venues. I think it's the same for music. I'm hoping, at least I hope. So yeah, I do think it's going to change, and I hope it does. But there's also a general shallowness, though, that has just become so inherent in an entertainment industry because of social media. And I don't think that is going to go away. I don't think that's, man, dude, I've been out here in LA for 11 years doing the acting thing.
Yeah, man, your thing is, that's why I want to know your perspective. People want to be there.
The amount of times that I have been asked what my Twitter followers were in an audition to see if I'm a good actor. Every time that happens, I literally call up my manager. I'm like, I don't want to audition for these people ever again. Like, I have no interest in this. Like, what does my Twitter following have to do with my ability to fucking bite into a cheeseburger and say Carl's Jr. fucking 99-cent fucking deals for a commercial or whatever it is? Like, so there is a level of social media changing the way all art is presented and people are getting, work as artists that I do think is not going to go away, unfortunately. So I think, it's going to be a push-pull.
when you say people getting work as artists, I know you live in LA. Don't put anybody on blast. But when you're saying people getting work as artists through social media, who are these people?
You know what? It is.
Or is it like these roles where like commercial stuff like that where I don't necessarily, they're not like, oh, Chappelle, you're killing it. You know what I mean?
But I'm going to tell you though, like, as I maybe this is heartbreaking. I have been to clubs where people got booked because they have a YouTube channel. And this is their first time ever doing stand-up. And they're like a feature. They're like a big name. Hey, because they've got, millions of whoever. Like
I've seen that.
So there's
that makes sense.
And in commercial work, there is a big for getting like any acting commercial work. There's a big, and also like indie. If you're trying to book indie features like micro budget or low budget, like SAG ultra low budget movies, these people want because they know they're not going to have the huge names because they're making low budget features. They want to have a bunch of people who all have at least some presence because it'll be better for the product overall. It's all marketing.
Okay, that's a good point.
It used to be the creator's job to market their shit, and the people that showed up, the actors and everybody else showed up, even the fucking crew, gaffers, it wasn't their job to promote the thing. They got paid to show up and make it, and it was somebody else's job to promote it. Now it's all of our jobs to promote everything all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
But
all right.
But so, anyways, entertainment business.
That's a very good theory. My buddy has a theory. I'm recording a comedy album in August. So my buddy is like, "Yo, dude, killing on this thing." So I mean, hopefully, all these things converge into me. Obviously, everybody wants to make money, but converging to me, things going well. But he's like, "Yo, I think it's gonna be like a vacuum." So very similar to your series. He goes, I think it's a vacuum. And I think the great comics or the great musicians and the great entertainers are going to get just sucked up in this vacuum because people are going to need content. So, he was like, hey man, do good on this project, right. Like this should be, so that's his theory. But then part of me was like, yo, if they're just grasping for content, have you seen Netflix lately? I didn't put anything on there. I was like, so maybe they'll just grab whoever.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know, but that theory that your girl has is that's a good one. Roaring 20s.
I'm hoping the Roaring 20s is going to be real because, I don't know about you, but the pandemic has made me desperate for an audience, like in like a real life crowd. And I haven't done stand up in years, and I haven't done any sort of, actually that's not true. I've done like the occasional little guest spot in a thing, or like if a friend here is putting on like a sketch show where they need like one person to do a quick thing, or I played guitar in something, like, so I've had a very, very minimal live crowd experiences, but the pandemic has reinvigorated all that because as much as like, I moved to LA to very much become an actor. And that didn't mean that I didn't have a goal of still doing stand-up and being a stand-up, but I always wanted to, kind of like what you were talking about in Seattle. I always wanted to be a stand-up who was working and who didn't need to be on TV. I just wanted to work, right? I wanted to get paid to tell jokes to fund my acting career, which is what I wanted to do as like that was sort of my end game here. And as much as I still very much am concentrating on, like, I'm working on my next feature right now, and I'm trying to, I just did one of your shows. Just did a friggin' like a little voice acting gig for Marvel that I'm trying to turn into some voice acting work and all this shit. As much as I'm trying to do all that, I'm almost sick of movies, and I'm almost sick of narrative TV shows because of the pandemic, because that's all we did all pandemic. For a whole year now, we've just watched movies. And at some point in the pandemic, I realized, like, oh my God, I'm enjoying like stand-up shows so much more, and I'm enjoying like sketch shows and things that are recorded with an audience. And it's because I'm realizing, I fucking miss an audience. That's what it is. I miss the sound of human beings in a room all sharing an experience just for us right then and there. So hopefully everybody's feeling that, and that will lead us to a nice big resurgence of in-person art in the 20s, but we shall see.
Yeah.
All right, listen, I know that there's a million threads I want to pull with you. I can go as long as you want, man. I don't even know. We haven't even talked about the fact that you're married, you got a kid.
I'm married.
This
got
is
a whole life, man.
You got a whole life on about. We might say that for next time. We might have to do this again.
Okay.
Because I would be remiss if we didn't, while I have it here, at least mention the work you have been doing and the stuff you put in. You've got 2 albums that I saw were available on Spotify. I'm not sure. I
Yes.
know To Whom It Doesn't Concern is also on Amazon and Tidal.
Yeah, man. It's everywhere.
I'm Right About This. Is that the name of the first
Yeah,
album?
that was
from way back
that was
when?
the first one that's available. Yeah.
And is that also available outside of Amazon? I'm sorry, outside of Spotify?
Yeah, I think it's like on. It should be. I mean, I hope. I think I paid for it. I hope it should be everywhere. It should be like Google, whatever, the Google Play and Pandora and whatever. It's not on XM Radio. So one of the reasons I actually cut an actual deal for this album I'm recording in August. It's very hard, at least for me, to get on XM Radio, even though I had some connect. You know how it is. Sure. Oh, I know a guy, and then you mail the thing, and then dude, but it ain't up there.
I've always said for years that the whole the entertainment industry is all about who you know is such a bullshit myth. The entertainment industry is all about who knows you and who cares. Because I know a whole lot of people, but they don't give 2 shits about what I'm doing.
That's a good point. Yeah, man.
So you're working again on XM for the one you recorded in August.
Yeah, man. This one's going to be hopefully it's a big deal. But
nice.
I love both of the projects that I already did. The last one I really liked. The last one.
You did Unsubstantiated, which is the name of the one that you did for Dry Bar Comedy.
That's the Dry Bar thing. That one, that's fine. It's fine. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say it's fine on the thing.
Oh, man.
It's great.
Courtney, I missed you, man. I missed this outlook. Man. I need more people in my life like you who understand that you could just say, it's fine. It's fine. It's all right. I don't hate it, but it's fine.
I know you're trying to, I don't know if you're trying to wrap up, but
no, it's fine. I'm not. I got no time.
It's one of those things too, like, it is the backbone of like what I believe. So when I went to New York the second time, this is when, now my wife, but we were dating at the time. Yeah. And living in New York. And I remember like, I'm working and I'm getting nothing. You know how it is, man. You just, you go there, there's so many people ahead of you. You're just waiting on people to die, man. It's basically what you're doing. You're waiting for people to die, career-wise, physically. Maybe you fall down the steps at the Comedy Cellar, I can get your spot. You're just waiting around. So I remember my goal when I started stand-up, I was like, I'm gonna give it a year because I knew like, okay, I'm getting older. Even though I'm not old, but I'm dating somebody, I'm serious. Like, how much longer can you do like this rat race of like, I'm gonna chase this thing? So I was like, this is it, So I go up there and I'm like doing no spots. I remember doing this club. Oh, it was a dump. It was in Times Square. And I remember that the club had 2 rooms inside of it. So, they're just jostling people on the street, raking these tourists in and just taking whatever their money, right? So both clubs would go at the same time. So I remember I go to the club, my lucky day. I would come to the club with a book. Oh, I knew I was never getting up. When you come to the club with a book, you're never getting up.
I needed shit to do.
But so the guy comes up, he's like, yo, Mark, Mark got sick. I'm like, oh, it's my day, man. So I remember the host like doing that. And I remember like, the guy was like, yo, he's here. He can just do like spot. And I remember the host like kind of looking, is like, I'm just going to do both spots. I was like, wow. That was it. So good. So then I got a showcase after that at a Yuck Yucks Comedy Club. Canada. So I go up to Toronto and the show is fine. And I ended up getting past at the club, but it wasn't great. And so that day was that was the day I made the decision. I was like, I'm not going to be here because my goal was to be just a great stand-up comic. That was it.
Right.
I didn't want to be famous. Didn't want to be on TV. I didn't want any of that. I just thought, especially like I was balancing the job, even from the very, very beginning. I was like, if I'm get access to everything everybody else has access to, I'm just able to do comedy. I was like, I think I can be the greatest ever. So I just think I can. That was it. That's my goal even now. It's like, yo, I just want to be just the greatest ever, period.
Right.
So I didn't need to be in New York to do that. So I said it to say, so when I do the Dry Bar thing or whatever, I'm like, it's good. Because like, what are you actually going to do to me? Like, what does it matter?
Right.
It was never like this idea of, somebody's like, oh, well, I need to get whatever booked off this. I mean, pandemic sucked because it slowed down the progress of what I was trying to go to. But in general, didn't really do anything to me. It really didn't because, by that time we had moved to Florida and I was like, all right, I'm going to tackle it from here. So, so that's like, when I do the projects, like, I'm like, cool. And that's why I asked you like about like the LA thing and like, oh, well, what are people getting out of this? Because like the dude that took my spot, he was terrible. He got nothing out of that.
No,
he got zero out of that. You know, because I was like, what's the mentality of like, you try to like, you know, make me tougher? If you know what I mean? That's like, it's kind of useless. Like none of us are getting Letterman from, and you know, some Times Square whole, you know what I mean?
And it's that mentality, man. It's that mentality that I am trying to cultivate on my own here in LA. Hell, even while I started freaking Dragon Wagon Radio, like this podcast network, as a way to be like, instead of all of us like nipping at each other and trying to, you know, do something like, or like, you know, cut somebody else down so that ours could be better because we feel like, oh, if only we, all the people who cared about them cared about me instead of being like that, what if we all just try to elevate each other? What if we all just try to make each other better at the thing we do? It's even the way that I've like, you know, like in the movies I've done, like my first feature, and don't get me wrong, it's a double-edged sword. My first feature that I released, Pinch, available now on Amazon Prime. That's my plug for this show. Please watch it. Even that movie, like, you know, I put in a bunch of people in that movie that like friends of mine who I really enjoy their work. Like the 5 leads in that movie are all people who I thoroughly enjoy their work. None of them have a social media presence. None of them are like these like gung-ho, I'm spending my life doing everything I can to act. And it's a double-edged sword. Because one, I got to make something that felt low pressure with friends of mine that I think are talented, and we all did something together, and we have this product that we can present that people can be proud of. Yet simultaneously, out of the 5 leads, I'm the only one that even uses social media, so no one's advertising this movie. Like I said earlier, it's everybody's job now, you know. But with that said, like
that's
it's that it is that mentality though of like what are you getting out of you know, like what's the end game for the work you're putting in? Like how do you justify? Like, like, what are you reaping from this specific sow? And I feel like, you know, I've tried to live with this by this motto over the past couple of years, and it's tougher because, like you said, like as you know, we're getting older. I just turned 38 a couple weeks ago. Like, you start wondering, like you said, like you start wondering, like, all right, like how long does this rat race go for? We put this bar of success, whatever that means for us, whether it's like, I just want to be working and I want to be able to pay my rent by doing stand-up. I want to be able to do this. Whatever that bar is, you put it. You know, it's all fucking arbitrary because you might feel completely different the next day. And the day after that, you might feel completely different again. So it is very much like being an addict. You got to take it day by day. But anyways, what I was trying to say was the motto I've been trying to live by for the past couple of years is just do good work well. That's what I've been trying to say. I've been trying to tell myself that, like, instead of worrying about what is this podcast that I'm putting time into going to get me? What is this going to, like, what is this ultimately going to do for me? I'm trying to just make sure that the work I'm doing it well and it's good enough in my mind. Like, I'm proud of it, right? Whether it's, you know, auditions that I'm doing or short film projects or my feature or if I'm pre-production for trying to do some live show or whatever it is, do good work well. And ultimately at the end of the day, like you know, when you lay on your head down on your pillow every night, you have to assess whether or not like the day was worth it. And if you do good work well, generally you'll feel like the day was worth it. Maybe one day you won't, and you'll realize, you know, shit, I'm going to fall back and, you know, be an architect or whatever the thing is. But that's, I feel like, the best you can do, at least for me at this point in my career.
Yeah, I mean,
but
it's valid, man. It's super valid.
But I digress, man. Dude, again, I feel like we could yap forever. We got so much catching up and shit to talk about, but we might have to save this. This was so fun, man. I really have enjoyed, you know, just kind of bullshitting with you and getting to know you. We got to do this again sometime soon. Again, find Kortney's his specials. At least I know for a fact they're both on Spotify. At least we think they're both on Amazon.
Yeah. You can check. This is when I plug my stuff.
Yeah, I'll do it for you, so it's not so right, so you don't have to be so shameless. Listen, I try to treat people right here. I'm right about this. Which is his first special that he recorded years ago. He's got To Whom It Doesn't Concern on Spotify, Amazon, and Tidal. He's got, which, by the way, talking about taking everything day by day, my favorite name for a podcast ever, The Last Show Podcast.
Oh, man.
With Kortney Shane Williams, because every show might be the last show.
This might be the last
show. The beginning of the last episode, where you were like, man, I tried to do ad video of this. I opened Photoshop.
It was a disaster.
I'm not getting paid to open Photoshop.
It was a disaster. I'm like, I'm not here to work.
It might be the last show
I
every week.
approach the podcast. It's not the Joe Rogan podcast.
So
I'm not doing it to be famous.
Kortney's Last Show podcast. You just shoot the shit on whatever pop culture news, all sorts of sports. It's like a fun everything kind of show.
Try to make it funny, and that's brilliant. That's the only goal, is to make it funny.
Try to make it funny. And at Kortney Shane on Twitter and Instagram, that's KORTNEY Shane, and I'll post all that obviously in the show notes and all the posts on this shit like that. So please follow Kortney and keep your eye out for whatever this special that we're doing. Hopefully catching up on Sirius Radio.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I think this is the one, man. I think this is the one. I gotta do. I'm working with an 800-pound gorilla. So
nice.
This is like my first actual contract. Every other album I did, I hired my own engineer, own producers, whatever. It's a lot of work, but I was able to own it. So hopefully, the partnership to them help lift those albums up too. And I think this is a good one. I think it's gonna be a good one. So
I'm stoked to hear it, and I'm looking forward to it. If you're enjoying this show or any other shows in the network, please do me a favor. Head on over to Apple Podcasts, drop a 5-star review or whatever review you think is fair. Do all the rating and reviews, all that good stuff. Check out elaboratepod.com. You can grab yourself some official merchandise. That goes a long way in helping me keep the lights on and helping me ensure this isn't the Last Show podcast with Jake Lloyd Bacon. Official merch is there. You can join the Discord if you want to chat. That's all free. You can find all of that stuff at elaboratepod.com. Like I said, check out my movie Pinch. I'll plug that again since I got the opening. Find me on Twitter and Instagram at Jake Lloyd Bacon. You know all the things, everybody. You know all the things. As I say at the end of each and every one of these shows, please be an artist, not an influencer. Create art, not content. Kortney, thank you so much for showing up, man. I love you.
Thank you for having me, man. I love you too, man. Got to do it again.
Hey there, my name is Wingman Steve.
And I'm Chris.
Chris what?
Yeah, I'm not saying it.
Come on, man, say it. It's cool.
I'm Chris 183.
Yeah, Chris 183. That's cool. What do you call a cow that plays an instrument?
I have no idea.
A musician.
Anyways, Steve and I are both 30-something dads.
But we are super cool, awesome 30-something dads who love to nerd out over the power-chorded glory that was 90s and early 2000s pop-punk music.
We are both huge fans of the pop-punk genre, even though nowadays we're pure Baby Shark.
Join us on High School Never Ends, the Pop Punk Dad podcast, where we'll discuss, debate, and revel in a music genre that we feel deserves much more love.
At least once we get the kids to bed.
It's High School Never Ends at hsnepod.com and wherever podcasts are found.
Dragon Wagon.